Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Higgins, psychologist and relationship coach, and this is the Empowered Relationship Podcast, where we explore how to cultivate more secure functioning, development, and connection in relationship. Today, we are talking with Jessica Baum, psychotherapist and author of Safe, Coming Home to Yourself and Others. In today's conversation, we're going to be addressing how to heal attachment wounds and build more secure relationships from a more embodied, felt sense. And my hope for this conversation is that you feel a little more supported in deepening your awareness, your compassion, and your courage, and how you experience relating. Let's dive in. If you'd like to strengthen your relationship with more clarity and care, download the free relationship guide, 12 Relationship Principles to Strengthen Your Love to Practice the Foundations of Secure, Lasting Connection. You'll find powerful ways to deepen trust, improve communication, and keep love alive. Let's get started. Jessica, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to have you on the show again.
I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And as a licensed psychotherapist and running the Relationship Institute in Palm Beach, and this is your second book that you've written, and you focus a lot on helping people understand the integration of neurobiology using polyvagal and attachment theory, as well as some of your other and being trauma informed and somatics. And do you want to name your most recent book here?
Yeah, Safe, an attachment-informed guide to building more secure relationships is the one that just got released.
I love it. And again, I will put the link to your other episode, to your other book, and all of that on today's show notes as well. So, Jessica, what do you want to share a little bit about how this book became important and what prompted you to do this piece of work here?
Sure, yeah. So I wrote Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love, and it's done phenomenally. It continues to sell. And my own healing continued after that book, and I dived deeper into interpersonal neurobiology. And a lot of people were telling me they have more than one attachment style, which is true. And a lot of people were coming to me with all these questions. And through my own somatic healing and just everything that I was learning, I wanted to give people a deeper dive into attachment, a more nuanced dive. I talk about the wheel of attachment. That's one of the freebies, but to help people really understand attachment theory instead of just, anxiously attached is amazing and it has healing qualities, but I would say this goes like 5 levels deeper in terms of the inner work and the somatic work that you get with the book. And it really explores all the attachment patterns, and you look at a wheel, so you're starting to look at it more holistically about how you move on that wheel. So it was just the evolution from the first book.
I love that. And sounds like you were responding to what your clients were sharing with you, what people were asking about, and just your own understanding. I've been talking about the attachment experience being on a continuum. So I'm so grateful that you've distilled some of this in a holistic view. Did you do research around this too, or was it just compiling based on what you've gathered through all your work?
Actually, the wheel is from my mentor, Bonnie Badenoch, and I credit her. She helped me a lot, and she wrote Heart of Trauma. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but she's just brilliant. And since Anxiously Attached, I've been studying under her for a long time, and she introduced me to the wheel. And the wheel, when you really understand the wheel, and I don't know if we should go into it because it's detailed, but you start to understand, attachment less from a left shifted hemisphere way and more from a way of like, oh my God, this is so nuanced and layered, and you can move on the wheel and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, I would love to ask more about that. And for people listening, some of which I know are very familiar with some of the background and context of attachment system, how we in early life develop it, but also for people who haven't really heard very much. I know you do a beautiful job of helping people understand how this relates to a sense of safety, since we're going to focus on safety and relationship, how early experiences inform our experience in adult romantic relationships.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of safe, we start talking about what we are like in womb and early development, and we're this right hemisphere creature, which you know, and we're reaching, and we don't have fully developed nervous systems yet. Like we are living more in sympathetic, and we don't have a rest and digest fully formed, and so we're really one energetic unit with our primary caregiver. And so, if our primary caregiver was struggling themselves with their own implicit world or their own wounding or like the hustle culture or life or relationship struggles, if our parents were struggling and not attuning emotionally to us enough, we don't internalize the felt sense of safety inside. And so, the internalization of the felt sense of safety is essentially the basis of secure attachment. So many of us, myself included, my mom was pretty anxious, my dad was pretty unavailable. So I internalized though that kind of connection early on. And as you grow up, you know, you might have some abandonment wounds, or you might struggle in relationship, or you just might not feel as safe in the world. And a lot of this early, I guess, felt sense of lack of safety comes from our earliest experiences. And, you know, Safe talks about it a lot because I get a lot from clients like, well, my parents were there and they loved me. But if they weren't emotionally present, which many of our parents was, we still feel an abandonment. We still feel a disconnect. And it's not until you start doing the work and getting attuned and being in co-regulation and getting what you maybe didn't receive when you were younger that you start to realize that you actually didn't receive what you needed when you were younger. But we can re-internalize people and earn security later on. So Safe talks a lot about doing the inner work and re-internalizing people to build some more inner security.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for just giving a little bit more description here for people to orient. And as you talk about felt sense and also the reality that some people may be functioning in the world and appear to have many domains of their life working well, but also still seeing some gaps in this healthy relating and intimate relationship. As you say, they might look back on their early life and think, oh, all of my needs, I was cared for, it was stable. And yet there's still this lack of attunement or misattunement. Do people come to you with curiosity around, here's what my result? I continue to be attracting a certain type of partner or keep participating in unhealthy dynamics? And or do you see people that are just really internally not feeling settled in themselves, not feeling able to really relax or receive? Because there's a body component to this. Do you want to speak to the felt sense body and then also how people recognize when there's an opportunity for like inner work here?
Yeah, I feel like both are true. Like I think, I it's hard because those are two big questions and they're both very relevant. I think that often what happens to us, for myself included, is when we're young, we experience a lot of things that get stored implicitly in our body. And sometimes we're not even conscious I tend to think we are more conscious than we think, but we're not connecting to it in the way that we're making sense of it. And so often when we meet people, even if in the beginning it doesn't appear that way, but they resonate with something that's familiar with us, we will move towards them. And if it's unhealed dynamics and patterns and way of relating and familiar, we might think, oh, this is the one, right? Like this feels so much in resonance with me. This feels familiar. And intensity can get mistaken for love and familiarity can get mistaken for love. And we tend to recreate our familiar patterns. So we might start to think like this person is the answer and they show up so wonderfully. And then months, years down the road, we're like reliving our childhood wound. We're alone again. We're feeling like we're not enough. We're reliving everything all over again in our adult relationships. This happens to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that can happen is that we can be in relationship with someone and it can be going okay. And then something can happen that can reawaken old implicit memory as well. So it's not always that we're attracted. Sometimes like maybe we have more of a secure base and there's some disorganization and all that's hidden. and you get cancer or a life event or stress gets thrown at you, and then your relationship with me changes, and now it's awakening more disorganization or more a lack of unsafety that's familiar in me. So it can come up in certain dynamics, and we can also, and very much are, gravitated towards people who feel familiar to us.
Thank you. I want to unpack some of what you're describing. So, for people who aren't familiar with implicit memory, this is what we maybe feel like we have cognitive memory or brain knowledge about. Can you talk to people about how this plays a part in the attachment system?
Yeah, I mean, and I would say that focuses so much on implicit memory, and like it's such a hard thing to really grasp. But when we're not born with explicit memory. So like the type of memory that we all think is memory, like, oh, you know, like a movie in our brain. That's what we think of as memory. That's not how we store memory when we are like 0 to 4. We're storing sensation. So all of our earliest attachment experiences are stored as sensation in our body, and we are taking in implicit information so much more, like every second. Like you and me, Jess, are taking in implicit, like our eye contact, our body language, our energy, everything implicitly is coming through these streams in our body versus explicitly that we're both on a screen and we're talking to each other, we're doing this podcast. So we're storing so much more implicit information through sensation and experiencing so much more. And that information and that memory so much more drives our choices, our behaviors, and what we choose in life. So a lot of the book is getting conscious of that, because that is usually what's driving most of our choices.
Thank you. It's so, so powerful. And I appreciate that you even mentioned in utero that we're learning, yes, that this impact in the environment and the experience in relationship like in the room, and then also just as one gets born and the relationship there's so much that's happening, and you're describing how this is developing our brains, our nervous systems, our attachment system. It's quite profound. And so to the question around awareness, how would somebody begin to look at their sensations as it relates to relationship? And also, we may want to talk, this is a follow-up, around the ways in which we might not be in contact, whether or not it's our protective coping strategies. But where do you start with people around awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about in chapter 5, like I was a pretty bad workaholic for a while, and I use Ian McGillichrist's work, but I talk about the hemispheres of the brain, and that I was hiding out in my left hemisphere. I'm pretty disconnected from my body. And the research says that about 75% of the Western culture is living like this, where we're just go, 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 and we are not connected with our body. And we need to live like this to survive if we don't have the capacity to be with, and we don't have the support to be with what's going on inside. In the book, I talk about developing interoception, which is usually a missing link. Like if our parents didn't attune to us and kind of go there with us inside our body, we don't know how to even process the sensational experience or connect with. So first we have to slow down. I had to slow down. Most people have to slow down, shift out of the left a little bit, and get more in touch with the body. And that can be a process. I mean, a lot of people meet like numbness or dissociation or a wall for a while. So I talk about finding anchors, but learning how to develop interoception is spelled out for you. And it's so important that we learn this capacity. It's a missing developmental link, and it's how we get in touch with our attachment wounds.
So, so powerful. So you're directing people to the book to have a little bit more guidance around that. Is there anything you want to say around how somebody could begin just to develop, and just a small
I would say, like,
suggestion?
if you're fighting with your husband or your wife or your boss and you feel like something in your stomach or something in your heart, and you have these sensational experiences that are really big in your body, we also know that there's memory attached. We usually know, okay, this pattern, or for me, I use this example in the book, like whenever my partner would like turn their back towards me, it woke up all my abandonment. I could feel it in my body. It hurt so deeply. And so when we're having these interactions with the people that we're close with and they wake up a lot of sensational experiences, like your heart hurts or tightness in your chest, blockness in your throat, your stomach feels queasy, we know that we're now attaching, we're now getting in touch with the implicit world.
Great. And that if one's trying to look for an actual memory in the traditional sense, like explicit, the way that we think, that perhaps that is gathering a lot of information and is extremely valuable.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'll be with a client and she'll be like, I don't remember. And I'll be like, what does your heart feel? Or what does your body feel right now? And she'll be like, I just had this tightness in my chest. And I'll be like, can you for a second trust the science that is the memory? And
Mhm.
so I have to do that over and over. But once I do that enough with a client, they start to build a relationship with the sensations going on. They start to kind of relate to themselves differently. And they start to see the gravity of what these sensations are speaking to us and how we have to hold and heal them.
Yes. And the compassion around how it perhaps even makes sense. I mean, this is probably weaving in some of the left brain, but in the context of the family system, like how it makes sense that that would have been the experience.
Yeah, I mean, and so the left brain is needed, right? And I provide so much science in this book because my anxious self needed the neuroscience to understand the healing process to help anchor me through the healing process. And I actually think it's really important that we do understand this. It's not just like inner child woo woo. It's like
Mhm.
neural nets opening, sensations, memory. What really happens? What does holding space really mean? What does that mean between nervous systems? Like if you keep showing up, will you heal? You know, they want the left brain information to just ground them because it can be challenging.
Oh my gosh, and can feel potentially like approaching an abyss and stepping off of a cliff and what's gonna happen, and, like, I've had so many clients, I'm like, "Am I gonna be just like a unfunctional pool on the a pool a puddle on the floor?" Like, it just feels like it takes away but to have that context, but it also doesn't alleviate, I will say from my own experience, it doesn't alleviate the fear of confronting and going there and what feels very perhaps unknown in the way of being attentive to it in this very conscious way. But it's been, to your point, it's with us and we know on some level that it's operating, but to be attentive to it.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, as much as I can explain the science, everyone's unique inherent wisdom. And I think that's really important if you're listening and you're in your healing journey or you want to start your healing journey in the context of safe relationships. And we could talk about what that means from nervous system to surface, nervous system to nervous system. In the context of safety, your own inherent memory system and wisdom will help you unfold in the way that it needs to unfold. And that trust is really hard. We
Mm.
sometimes need anchors and professionals to say, no, you're actually right in it and it's okay. Because the unfolding is kind of like there's a little bit of uncertainty there, but there's so much wisdom in our bodies. And through studying interpersonal neurobiology, there's so much in us that want to heal, that want to go towards healing. So we just need the right people in the right places and the right type of support to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Because as you've already mentioned, perhaps our tendencies might be to seek the familiar, seek intensity, or ways in which we protect ourselves or feel like we have to overfunction to earn love or this way of distancing to feel safe, that makes sense in the context of learning and also perhaps interfere with developing more of the safe, secure functioning. So, can we talk about that before we talk about safe, developing more safe relating? When you are helping someone who is recognizing ways in which they overfunction or certain patterns that they do that they might label as problematic or I need help with this. How do you help people hold that in the context in the healing process?
Yeah, I mean, and I talk about this in chapter 3, but I call them your protectors. And
Mhm.
a lot of people want to hate their protectors. Like if it's, you know, an eating disorder or like a non-glamorous one, you know. Mine was workaholism, which is totally glamorized in our culture, but we have so many protectors. And in the book, I talk about turning towards them because we've needed them. So a good example is if we don't have the ability to process what's going inside, we will develop obsessive behavior of some kind to try to cope with what we've not been able to cope with. And so instead of hating that behavior, we actually have to turn towards it and say, you are protecting me of something and you're actually welcomed here. And so welcoming our protectors is actually a vital part of healing. And like you have to, I know it's hard because people are like, I don't want to welcome that part of me, or I don't like that part of me, or I don't like that behavior. But it's like that behavior is trying, it's probably not doing a great job and sometimes making you miserable, but it's trying to protect you from your original wounds. And so it can stop working so hard when we can start to be with them.
Yes, that's so essential. I know Internal Family Systems, does a lot to support people, and appreciate just the compassion that you're offering, that many people, myself included, when there's parts that are operating that I find extremely challenging, I want to push them away. Just like, oh, okay, don't want to do that anymore. But to recognize, it sounds like you're saying there's a real value and purpose and way in which they're serving. And that if we can be intentional about showing up for the felt sense and what's living in us from that implicit place and that early understanding of relationship, then they don't have to, they're like, you got it. You can take it.
Yeah. I mean, like an alcoholic or an addiction, if we didn't have the capacity to process and feel at the time, we're going to turn towards things that can help us cope with life. And it's going to make sense when we go back into your childhood. If you didn't have people to process, if you didn't know if that was the only way to regulate your nervous system, but when we can be with the original pain more and more, and you and I can develop the capacity to hold it, and you can get what you didn't get then, you won't need to use quite so much. I'm not saying on a bad day you're not going to reach out for this, and I'm not saying that this happens overnight. I'm saying we need these protectors for good reason. Like I needed workaholism for years of my life. I had no idea what I hadn't faced, and workaholism was like the perfect distraction. I was miserable, but I was surviving. I was in survival mode. And I just said to myself one day, like, I want to get out of survival mode. I understood the science, slowing down and being with what was going on inside of me. And I got out of survival mode. And I got out of workaholism, and I have much more space in my life for a meaningful connection, and I have much more meaning and depth.
Hmm.
But I couldn't have done that without slowing down and doing the work with the right resources, if that.
Mm. Yes. And for people listening, I imagine there's a sense of the invitation here is to perhaps acknowledge the ways in which the attachment systems got developed, honoring the protective parts and the tendencies, and also for the healing journey, exploring from this grounded felt sense, self-attunement, a new way of operating. So it's almost like letting the old a bit maybe lessen in its being in the driver's seat and giving more space. But this can be difficult to trust, right? So this is where
Slow.
yes. Well, and even how fast sometimes they might be experiencing the world or encountering a new potential partner. So how do you help people trust when somebody is perhaps feeling a sense of excitement or this level of intensity with a new person, but yet perhaps they know and they're right, or some part of them is recognizing there's some big warning signs here, but they don't trust that like the other way or the new way is going to be successful because they haven't had the experience.
Yeah, I mean, usually they start having the experience with me. So, or an anchor. I talk about finding your anchors in the book. So once you start to get people who are in a ventral state more often and can hold you and co-regulate with you and anchor you, your nervous system starts to register that as love and starts to register that as like real emotional showing up. That doesn't happen overnight.
Mhm.
There's a lot I could talk about dipping into vulnerability and being really present. And I remember my therapist being one of the first people to really be present with me and how hard that was for me for a
Mhm.
period of time. Like I didn't want to show up for therapy. But after a while, my nervous system started to recognize that people showing up in this capacity, willing to hold me, not fix me, not tell me what to do, to stay with me, that this is love. And my nervous system had to register that over and over. And I have not just therapists, but anchors. I call them anchors, people in your life who have this capacity. And I talk about finding your anchors and the importance of that because you know that early wounding can't be healed without adult anchoring, but it's a reorienting to understanding that being slowed down and being present and being connected in that way is what my nervous system didn't get. So I need to start to receive that more and more and more to start to register that this is my new norm or this is what I need from people versus going towards my familiar, which is usually intensity and emotionally unavailable. And so actually the reorienting was very hard because we have a strong pull towards the other, and the other can be like an escape.
Mhm.
So once we start to kind of slow down and get real anchoring, it's hard because we have to be present with what we've been avoiding and we have to show up. But after a while, our system starts to register that kind of holding. And then after a while, we start to expect that and then we become more secure. So we're like literally reorienting to a new familiar, but it takes time, you know? And it happens really slowly. I hope that the listeners aren't listening and like this isn't like that far out there. I know you're shaking your head because you're a trauma therapist and you and I speak the same language, but it's like in the experience of someone who has the safety that you need, eventually your nervous system starts to recognize that as what you need and you start to gravitate towards more people who can have that capacity and more people who are emotionally available. So you just got, it's like a reorienting too.
Absolutely. This is the reorienting, the rewiring, the learning that is occurring to give scaffolding to this earned, secure functioning. So you've mentioned anchorings a few times, and I know Dana talks about it, but you have your own way of helping people understand this internal, external. What would you like to share here to help people
Yeah, it's
understand
like
that?
very different than Dana's work. I know she wrote a book, Anchored, and that's about the nervous system, and she has a whole process. This is more about, I would say Bonnie Badenoch's work, but like coming from the lens that we can't build inner security without anchoring first. So we weren't insecure babies because we didn't have the adult anchoring. We didn't get the co-regulation to develop the self-regulation. So the big theory here is that we need safe people, safe nervous systems to anchor us. So the paradox is we become more secure with more dependency on the right people. And that's how we internalize through mirror neurons and resonance circuits. We internalize new people, thank God, throughout our lives.
Hmm.
We didn't have safe people as kids. We get to pick people now and we get to be anchored by them. And I show in the book, like their nervous system is still going to be shifting through different nervous system states. And ours will be dipping into the implicit world and coming up, and they're holding us and they're literally anchoring us, you know, while we move through this stuff. And so that's what we needed as children. We needed our adults to anchor us through our emotional process. Most of us never got that. I talk about intergenerational trauma. I never blame our parents. I even talk about healing those parts. But if we didn't get that as a kid, we need that as an adult. We need to fill in that anchoring experience. So it's very much the anchor is outside of us, being internalized so we can become more secure in that way.
Yes, and it's hard to reference, it's hard to internalize if we haven't had the relationship to support that. And for people who just have the audio, Jessica was holding one hand very consistent. You were saying maybe there's some slight fluctuation, but in a very supportive role, and that consistency, that the one that's still learning and accessing these implicit memories, these felt senses, and then being able to co-regulate or have some place of relationship that feels stable, reliable, consistent, that we can start to feel more safety in that, and also in turn start to feel our own regulation and then have more internal reference to security.
I'm a big believer that co-regulation, the ability to self-regulate, is due to really wonderful co-regulation.
Yeah.
So for your listening, those of you listening who are like, I need that drink, or I get so dysregulated, or I need to like have this perfect nervous system and I'm watching all that. No, we need more co-regulation. You need to depend on dependable people. You need people to help regulate you. And when you get enough of that, you develop your own capacity for self-regulation. That self-regulation is really born out of really healthy co-regulation.
I'm so glad you are a voice for this, because so often, as you mentioned, the Western world and the emphasis on being functioning and optimizing and efficient, that there's this almost illusion that we can willpower ourselves into, because people sometimes have a lot of intellectual insight and understanding, but it doesn't always translate to the lived experience. So it's this sense of like people want to willpower their nervous system, and the nervous system is going to win every time.
Yeah, I mean, you can extend your exhales. There are things you can do to try and help yourself, but the reason why you're so dysregulated and have a hard time regulating is because you didn't get enough holding and proper co-regulation. So give yourself a break. I know, like, it's healthy to reach out to a friend if you're upset. If that friend can hold space for you and be there for you, you're going to get back into connection. I mean, and sometimes you can't do it alone. Sometimes you can't get yourself back to baseline alone, and that's okay. Like, that's part of the healing process. After a while, when you're around enough co-regulating people, the science shows you internalize them, and you internalize that co-regulation. So you actually do develop self-regulation, and it's really born of co-regulation. And I'm a firm believer in that.
So am I. I'm so grateful, because this isn't, I mean, people can listen and read, and until we get into relationship and have these co-regulating experiences and this holding, it's hard to have real significant change because the nervous system isn't experiencing anything different.
And like the last thing I want, and I talk about this, is I was a young girl and I wrote Anxiously Attached for that 19-year-old. I talk about it in my first book, who was in the hospital for panic attacks. I read every single self-help book. I mean, I just cleaned out my bookshelf behind me for those of you who are watching, but I've read every single self-help book on under the sun, thinking that I wrote 2 books, thinking that I could figure it out, right? Like, I can figure this out. And the truth is, like, we don't heal the type of things that we're talking about unless we're in healing relationships. Like, we cannot heal alone. And so this idea that like you can be a bit independent and badass and read a self-help book and like I'm an author of 2, and I try to be with you as the author in the book, but the truth is you can't heal these things alone. You must heal what was wounded in relationship, needs to be healed in relationship. And I don't want people like spinning their wheels like I did for years, just thinking, oh, and the books helped. They soothed me. They gave me like, facing codependency was like, oh my God, I finally found like a word to describe like how messed up I am. And and that's why I wrote Anxiously Attached for anyone who like thinks they're codependent. Let's like dive deeper. But and the information is so important. But like I talk about this a lot in Safe, and like even my publishers are like, really? We have to put this in there? And I'm like, you guys, I keep after driving people to finding their anchors to do this work, because it's one thing to have the information and then you have to actually move the trauma out of the body, and you need adult anchoring or human or nervous system anchoring in order to heal. So it's an important message. And I think people like might be like, oh, I don't want to do this if I need that. And I get that. But like, if I don't give you that message and I'm like, here's a self-help book and go heal yourself, I'm just hurting you. and not giving you the full picture of like what your nervous system and what your body really needs in order to move through this and get to that earned security.
I so appreciate that. The authenticity and the real standing firm in the path towards this healing and more secure functioning. It doesn't just come from insight. And so, for one that's listening, as you just mentioned, cleaning out your bookshelf, if they look at their lives and have a hard time identifying safe adults to have this regulating experience with, I mean, that can be confronting.
Most of my clients, I'm like, who are your anchors? I have none. I I, I think that's, if you're listening, like that's the majority of where people start. It's so sad. Like it's so, so sad. And yet I encourage my clients to go through their Rolodex. I think sometimes there is an anchoring person that we are not thinking about. They might not be making us feel better or fixing us, but they have the ability to have the patience. Or I talk about how to go out and find people. If you can, not everyone can do this. I talk about co-anchoring. So like finding someone you can do the work with and you guys can co-anchor. As long as there's not too much dysregulation going on, you can do that. And yeah, like you have to process some of this stuff with another witness. That's how the science shows that it moves.
Hmm. Okay, so not all is lost if you can't identify. It's starting somewhere, and that is,
Yeah, no. And I am your anchor as the author in the book. It's
yeah.
more, but like I start out in that, so looking for that. And I think like in my experience, I talk about my grandmother being an anchor who is no longer alive. Like we have inner anchors and we have outer anchors. And for someone who's listening, you might be able to resource an inner anchor. So it might not be someone in your life right now, but you might have had an experience, a friend's mom, a coach, a teacher who was, secure, that we can start to resource and then look for more of that.
Yes, build on that.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time, and you mentioned the wheel of attachment. Would you like to briefly describe that? Because people who have been in the conversation and accessing relationship material are aware of attachment styles, and yet you're really helping us see this in a bigger way.
And you should get a link to the freebie, which is Beyond the Labels, which is the wheel of attachment, and a 40-minute talk with me and Bonnie Badenoch of what it feels like to go from insecurity to security in your body. So that's really special because she's really special to me. But I'm going to attempt to describe the wheel in this way. So, but if you download the freebies, you will get a PDF of this immediately. So it's like a circle square. On the bottom is security. On the top is disorganized. On the right is anxious. On the left is avoidant. So I talk about in one household, you can have many different experiences, but let's say you had a mom who was secure and sometimes anxious. So you're going to slide on the bottom of the circle and up to the right at times. And you're going to maybe slide in between here. Let's say your mom was anxious and then like kind of got violent or really, really aggressive. You're going to keep going up the wheel and you're going to hit disorganization. So with one parent, you can have, that. So on the other side, again, the base is security. And let's say your dad was avoidant most of the time. So very little security and you're in avoidance. And then he was neglectful and completely detached, right? You're going to slide up more and more and you're going to hit disorganization. So it's turning up the volume on each side, either the avoidance or the anxious side that gets us to the top where disorganization is. Now in the book, I talk about with your sister, you could have one relationship. With your mother, you can have all these embedded patterns and all these experiences in one household. And so you really kind of work on your wheel, and then you take that wheel and you place it over your current relationships to see if any of that is repeating in your life. So what early embedded dynamics did you experience early in life that now are showing up in your current world, to try to kind of get readers to start to identify that, oh my God, when my husband does this behavior, it's bringing up the avoidance I felt with my dad, or making these bigger connections. Because once we make those bigger connections, then when your husband's doing that, it's not just about him. We can start to be with the implicit information. So understanding the wheel and really how, and it makes sense when you're really looking at disorganization and how we get to disorganized. And for those of you listening, you might have heard that as fearful avoidant, because that's like the layman, but the scientific word is disorganized, which is the most terrified state where we don't have anywhere to land. So as we get either more anxious, turns to violence or anger or just extreme intensity, or more neglect turns to turn back, or, just someone not there. As you move up that, as your primary caregivers do more of those behaviors, we move into disorganization. So on the wheel, you can kind of say, with my mom, I remember her being really sweet at times, and then other times she was totally checked out. So then we're moving up to, to some avoidance. So you can start to kind of play with this wheel and overlay it with the relationships in your book. And I kind of walk you through that in the book, and really understand attachment more than these labels and more than patterns, but like, this is how we move on.
It's so dynamic, and that's where I think people can get confused. So to give more range to the lived experience, that it's not so categorical.
Yeah, and like you can have an avoidant, an experience with an avoidant husband and an anxious friend, and you can go back and be like, my dad was this way and my mom, it starts to make sense of how nuanced and complex and layered you really are.
Yes, thank you so, so much. And as you said, if we bring awareness, we have an opportunity to slow down and start to do some of this anchoring work, or being able to. Do you want to say a little bit more about how one earns more safe, secure functioning?
Yeah, I mean, for me and for most, sometimes you have to dive a little into the implicit world, but um, allowing another human being to hold space for you to witness your internal experience, developing interoception, like we said, and making these connections around like, oh my God, this is really how it felt in my body when I was little. And getting in touch with the embodied experience of our childhood is what most of us are disconnected from.
Mhm.
So I think this is going to wake you up, and get you in touch. But that's how we integrate. That's how we hold and integrate. And by the way, all of this might sound like, oh my God, but like there's so much freedom and expansion, and I don't know, an ability to be so much more myself now and connect more freely. And I have so many wonderful attachments rather than being hyper focused on trying to get my needs met from an unavailable partner. I have all these beautiful attachments, and it's been a journey, but like it is so worth it. I always say I have like so much inner space. I have so much more appreciation and gratitude and all these wonderful things that happen when we dive in and we do this work. So it's not all bad. It really, the outcome is really wonderful, and healing really does have its benefits, but healing means feeling and
Mm,
doing all of these things.
absolutely. And as you said at the outset, this is a deeper dive, and you're accessing a depth and an opportunity to access things that we typically haven't turned towards or haven't had the safety to turn towards. And so there's a real depth here that you're inviting.
Yeah, and for me, and it was a real coming to terms with my humanness. I keep going back to Stephen Porges's words, like connection is a biological imperative. Like we are so tender, we are so vulnerable, we so much need each other. And I think doing the work made me really realize that,
Mm,
and how much we don't live enough in connection or in community, and many of us are very isolated. So it's very true if you're feeling that way. It's really real. Like we were pretty isolated. We're not living in enough connection and community and having enough of this holding happening for us as little ones as well as adults.
absolutely. And I would just say, I think our modern culture is giving these proxies, or like kind of what could feel like fake connections through social media, or like, and not to say that I have issue with any of those modalities, but it can be an easy low hanging fruit or reach of a tendency for connection, but it doesn't offer what you're describing in the way of real relationship, real connection. And I think this can be difficult to start practicing and also the rewards and what it offers is tremendous.
Yeah. And I think that, we all want fulfilling relationships. And I think developing this inner security and developing these anchors, like you do deepen and you start to have really fulfilling relationships. In my experience, I've been pretty successful in my life. And don't get me wrong, I like nice things. I really like relationships are what makes my life worth living. It's those connections. And it took me a lot because being a workaholic and super kind of successful, I was like, but like really it comes down, the quality of our life really comes down to the quality of our relationships. And I'm like a firm believer in that now. So yeah, for whatever that's worth, I think the work is so worth it.
Lovely. Jessica, you've mentioned the freebie and people can get the Wheel of Attachment and also the interview. And will you say the name of your book again?
Yeah, it's Safe, an attachment-informed guide to building more secure relationships. And yeah, the freebie, also check your spam, but like you should get, Jessica will get the link and she'll link it. And there's a video of me and my mentor. And my mentor, Benny Boninoff, wrote Heart of Trauma, if you guys want to dive deep into even more. But she's like the person who teaches us therapists. So she's like my mentor, but she teaches us. So like it's a really sweet conversation and it's really deep about what it feels like in your body to move from insecurity to security. And so I just wanted to give the world a taste of her because I've been able to experience her and I want other people to experience her as well. So you'll get the wheel, you'll get her, and you'll get the book because this is coming out in November. So it all works.
Yes, excellent. Do you want to mention anything else, like your institute or anything else that you're offering, or is this really what you want to direct people towards?
I have a conscious relationship coaching group that's international, and then I have a private practice in Palm Beach, and I'm on Instagram at Jessica Baum LMHC. I've been saying this on every podcast, so I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do it. But like, if you read the book, please reach out to me. Let me know. I try really hard to personally connect to every single person who reaches out to me and the book touches them one way or another. Like it is important to me as someone who works for years on this stuff that you feel comfortable enough to reach out to me and tell me like what's going on for you and how it resonated with you. So I really encourage that.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to have all the links on today's show notes. Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jessica, for having me.
Thank you for joining in today's conversation, again with Jessica Baum. I hope that this dialogue helps you consider deepening in your understanding, perhaps getting on the journey of your work, your inner work, and cultivating more safety and intimacy in your relationship. If you're interested in the links mentioned, key takeaways, the full transcript, and the free relationship guide, you can visit drjessicahiggins.com and find podcast. I am so grateful to spend this time with you. It's an honor and a privilege. And until next time, I hope you take great care.